When Elaine Carter, my mother-in-law, extended that crisp white apron toward me and said with a glint of polished cruelty, "Put this on, dear." The real family's about to eat it was like the room exhaled without me. My lungs locked up, my chest went hollow, and for a long, suspended second I couldn't breathe. I stood there, rooted to the spot as if my feet had fused with the gleaming hardwood beneath me. My hands tightened around the silver serving tray. I was clutching the cold, ornate edges, biting sharply into my palms. I could feel every pair of eyes in that dining room, a sea of polite faces masked in practiced civility, yet brimming with thinly disguised judgment. Their gazes hung on me like heavy drapes, suffocating in their weight, waiting, watching, poised to witness whether I'd bend or break. And then, cutting through the tension like a paper slice, came the laugh. Nathan's laugh. My husband. The same man who once knelt in the middle of a rainy sidewalk, pressing my rain-soaked hand to his lips, swearing that the world would never touch me as long as he was in it. That man. He laughed. Not a boisterous belly laugh, not even a surprised chuckle. No, it was sharper, drier, a brief amused huff, like the tail end of an inside joke shared among the real family. Like this was all just another of Elaine's harmless quirks. Nothing serious. Nothing worth acknowledging. I turned my head toward him, searching his face as though I could will him to see me, to truly see what that moment had done. Pleading silently, begging for a flicker of recognition for his eyes to meet mine and say, "I know. I'm with you." But he wouldn't meet my gaze. His eyes danced away as if the very act of looking was too heavy, too loaded. Still I caught it, just for a blink. That tiny spark of guilt, a crack in his well-rehearsed indifference. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, swallowed by the heavy, deliberate silence that smothered the room. You know that kind of silence, the suffocating, sticky quiet that seeps into your bones. It stretched across the long mahogany table, filling the ornate dining room, until even the subtle clink of crystal sounded intrusive. Somewhere at the far end, an uncle, I couldn't tell who anymore, shifted his wineglass, the sound slicing through the hush like a guilty cough. Elaine, ever the picture of genteel dominance, stood regal and unmoving. Her posture was carved from decades of yoga classes and champagne luncheons, her spine-straight chin perfectly tilted to deliver disdain with elegance. The chandelier's soft glow caught her signature pearl necklace, scattering tiny reflections onto the ivory silk of her blouse. When her gaze landed on me, it wasn't laced with anger or even disdain. No, it was colder than that. Clinical. The way one might look at a misplaced fork or a stain on fine linen, something to be corrected quietly, efficiently. And that was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loud, not explosive, more like a tiny creeping fracture through glass. Silent, spreading, dangerous in its quiet persistence. From the corner of the room, Jack shifted. My boy, 7 years old with a soul twice that age. He sat at the kids' table, a modest little setup tucked near the bay window, his legs too short for the chair, swinging rhythmically, as if keeping time with the tension. His eyes, those big brown eyes that mirrored mine, were locked on me, watching, absorbing, understanding more than any child should. That's when it hit me like a punch to the chest. The shame wasn't Elaine's to give. I had long since accepted her view of me as an outsider, a charity project in pearls. But watching Jack witness it, watching his mother being measured and found lacking, watching her stand there and take it, that's what cracked my composure. That's what bruised deeper. My throat tightened, a slow, burning constriction. My vision blurred at the edges, the chandelier above turning into a smear of light. I blinked hard, forcing it back. Not here, not now. They would not get that from me. With deliberate slowness, I inhaled. The scent of rosemary lamb hung in the air, rich and suffocating, but it might as well have been nothing. The pounding in my ears drowned out everything else. Carefully, I set the silver tray down on the marble-topped sideboard, my fingers trembling as they released their grip. The chill of the stone seeped through my skin, grounding me barely. Inside, the war raged louder. One voice roared, "Enough. Stand tall. Don't let her belittle you again." Another whispered back, "Not here. Not in front of Jack. Don't make a scene you'll regret." They battled beneath my skin, pulling me in opposite directions as Elaine held the apron steady, her manicured fingers curled delicately around the fabric. "It's just a little family tradition, Lena," she said, her voice as smooth as silk, but with the bite of a concealed blade, as if that justified everything, as if reducing me to less was all in good fun. I wanted to ask her, "Tell me, Elaine, what kind of tradition requires reminding someone they don't belong?" But the words never left my lips. I simply stared, caught in that paralyzing intersection of fury and survival. And then I took it. I wish I could give you the version of this story where I ripped it from her hands, declared my worth with a cutting line, and walked out with Jack by my side. But life isn't always scripted for defiant exits. Sometimes survival doesn't look like a victory. Sometimes it looks like endurance. With hands that betrayed my calm facade, I slipped the apron over my head. The ties tangled briefly in my fingers, awkward, clumsy. I fumbled them into place, the cotton fabric settling against me like a badge of submission. Nathan, ever the master of looking away casually, lifted his wine glass, swirling the red liquid with a practiced indifference, as if the entire exchange had been no more significant than choosing a side dish. Elaine returned to her seat, her posture relaxed, her expression serene, victorious. She had drawn her line, and I had stepped exactly where she wanted me. But as I turned to find Jack, his chair sat empty. His napkin lay crumpled on the table. My pulse quickened. He was gone, and what he returned with would change everything. It's moments like these, small but seismic, that remind me why I share these stories. If this resonates, hit like, subscribe, and stay with me. Before the apron, before the smirk that cut sharper than the polished silverware gleaming on Elaine's table, there was a time I told myself I was lucky. Not lucky in the way people romanticize struggle, as if hardship itself were some badge of honor, but lucky because I had clawed my way out of the places meant to keep me small. I came from the South Ward of Newark, New Jersey, a place where windows weren't so much broken as they were surrendered, boarded up, in silent acceptance, ignored by passers-by, who had long since learned that asking questions invited answers they didn't want. I grew up in a cramped, sagging apartment with 5 foster siblings, where privacy was a luxury none of us could afford. Our bathroom door hung crooked on rusted hinges, never fully closing, much less locking. Survival there wasn't poetic, it was practical. My name is Lena Parker, and by the time I was 9, I had learned how to patch the soles of my shoes with duct tape, how to make a single can of watery soup stretch for 3 nights, and most importantly, how to vanish into the wallpaper when the yelling started. I wasn't supposed to escape that place. People like me didn't get out, but somehow I did. It wasn't dramatic, no grand rescues, just long nights bussing tables at a diner that never closed, textbooks balanced on my lap during cigarette breaks in the alley, studying by the glow of a flickering neon sign. I fought for every inch of progress, scraped together a graphic design degree from a no-name community college. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every blister, every sleep-deprived morning had earned it. That's when I met Nathan Carter. It was at a startup launch party in the city, one of those sleek, self-congratulatory affairs where champagne is poured more for optics than enjoyment. I hadn't been invited, not really. I'd designed a logo for a vendor, a favor for a friend of a friend, and as a thank you, they slipped me through the door. I remember standing there adrift in a sea of tailored blazers and expensive colognes, the kind of room where conversations floated several feet above my head. The champagne flutes in my hand felt too delicate, too foreign. I had tucked myself near the coat check, sipping watered-down bubbles, trying to disappear the way I used to when the world pressed too close. And then Nathan appeared. He had that golden boy glow, the immaculate fit of his charcoal suit teeth so straight they could have been a showroom sample, and the kind of easy confidence that grows in people who've never had to share a sandwich with 3 siblings. Yet there was curiosity in his smile, not condescension. "You a designer?" he asked, tilting his head toward the smudged name tag I'd scribbled on with a dying Sharpie. I nodded, bracing for the polite nod and dismiss, but it never came. Instead, he stayed, asked questions, real ones, where I learned, where I came from. And when I told him with bare honesty about sleeping in the back of a bodega when my foster mom locked us out, he didn't recoil. He listened. We started dating, quickly, intensely. For a while, it felt like a fairy tale repurposed for the modern world, rooftop bars, wine tastings, where I could barely pronounce the labels charity galas where I perfected the art of blending into floral wallpaper. His friends were polished, polite, always asking the same question with gleaming smiles. Where did you go to school again? The subtext hung in the air, weighty and unspoken. But the real test came when I met Elaine Carter, Nathan's mother. From the very first moment, her smiles stretched too tight across her face, the muscles pulling as though they resented the effort. She never said outright that I didn't belong. Elaine didn't need words for that. Every glance, every precision-cut compliment was laced with a silent refrain, "You are not one of us." I remember that first dinner vividly. The way she introduced me not as Nathan's girlfriend, not even as a partner, but as his little designer friend. A title as dismissive as the subtle upturn of her perfectly glossed lips. Nathan would brush it off. "That's just how my mom is," he'd say, squeezing my hand. "She'll come around." And I believed him. I wanted to believe him. When we married 2 years later, a quiet courthouse ceremony with only Nathan, me, and little Jack between us, I thought the ring on my finger would finally render me visible. But some people choose not to see you no matter how brightly you stand in their line of sight. That night, in Elaine's kitchen apron in hand, Jack's watchful eyes on me, I understood. I had spent years trying to squeeze into a mold that was never meant to fit me. And as much as I wanted to believe marriage, motherhood, and time would soften Elaine's sharp edges, they hadn't. That night wasn't the beginning of her cruelty, it was merely the night she stopped pretending otherwise. The occasion was supposed to be a celebration. Our 5th anniversary. Nathan had said his mother wanted to host a proper family dinner, small, intimate, just us, Jack, and his parents. I should have known better. Elaine never gathered people without a performance to offer. Her home was a portrait torn from the pages of a lifestyle magazine, grand bay windows, spilling golden light, a dining table set with the opulence of a Buckingham Palace feast. The air itself seemed curated, a fragrant blend of rosemary, roasted garlic, and lemon zest, her signature trifecta. Jack had darted ahead, captivated by the crisp napkin folds, his little bow tie askew, cheeks flushed with excitement. Elaine greeted Nathan with a kiss on the cheek, enveloping him in an embrace that barely bent her elbows. For me, she spared the obligatory half-hug, her eyes scanning me like a TSA body scanner for any sign of imperfection. "Well," she said, lips pursing into that familiar faux smile for a girl from the slums you've managed to clean up adequately. A whisper, yes, but not soft enough. The words sliced through me with surgical precision, leaving behind a wound no one else seemed willing to acknowledge. Nathan didn't flinch. Didn't pause. He simply breezed past, heading for the bar cart with a casual inquiry about the wine's temperature, as if his mother's words had been nothing more than ambient noise. My cheeks burned heat, radiating up my neck in waves, my pulse loud in my ears. I wanted to convince myself I had misheard, that it was a joke poorly timed and ill-executed. But there was no mistaking the satisfaction curling the edges of Elaine's mouth. Then came the apron. Pristine white, trimmed with lace, the letter E embroidered in looping, delicate script, a garment that had likely never seen a real kitchen. She held it out to me with a flourish, a queen bestowing a crown. "Put this on, dear," she said. "The real family is about to eat." That word, real. It clung to my ribs, sinking into the soft spaces, forming bruises from the inside out. I glanced at Nathan, desperate for a signal, a gesture, anything that hinted he recognized this moment for what it was. But instead he laughed. Not loudly, a soft, dismissive chuckle as though Elaine's words were a mere quirk, not a declaration of war. My heart twisted. Jack stood by the sideboard, his small fingers curling around the edge of the linen tablecloth, watching. He didn't speak, but his eyes spoke volumes. Those deep, dark eyes that mirrored my own, reflecting every ounce of tension I tried to bury. I didn't want to ruin the evening for him. He had been so excited, proud in his slightly too big blazer and scuffed dress shoes. I couldn't shatter that for him. Not tonight. So I took the apron. My fingers trembled as I looped the ties around my waist, each knot tightening like a noose binding me in place. Dinner commenced. Elaine reigned over the table, passing dishes with the grace of royalty, doling out small favors with every serving spoon. Nathan spoke animatedly about work, his latest partnership, his voice a steady hum of self-congratulation. I don't remember what I said. I was on autopilot, smiling, nodding, pouring, serving. A well-rehearsed performance. Then something shifted. Jack excused himself quietly, slipping away from the table with the soft murmur of a well-mannered child. No one noticed but me. He disappeared down the hallway, and I assumed it was for the bathroom or perhaps to retrieve a forgotten toy. But 10 minutes later he returned. Not with a toy, not with the innocence of distraction. He held his tablet in both hands, his expression composed unreadable. He approached me gently, tugging on my sleeve. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice steady, "can I show them something?" My heart already worn thin frayed further. I nodded, unsure of what was to come. With a quiet confidence that seemed far too large for his 7-year-old frame, Jack stepped toward the head of the table. "Excuse me, Grandma," he said, each word crisp, deliberate. "I want to show everyone something." Elaine blinked, disoriented, caught off guard by the sudden challenge. Nathan's fork paused mid-air. The room seemed to inhale. Jack pressed a button. The sleek screen of his tablet synced instantly to the grand television mounted across the living room wall. And in that instant, the carefully curated facade of the evening began to crumble. The silence after Jack disappeared was brief, but brimming. And when he returned, his small hands cradling his tablet like it was a shield and a sword in one, none of us had the slightest inkling how irrevocably the ground beneath us was about to shift. At first, no one moved. Not a breath was drawn as the cavernous living room dimmed slightly, the chandelier's glow softening, as if even the house itself was bracing. Then, the massive flat screen flickered to life, syncing seamlessly with Jack's tablet. The stillness fractured. My son's fingers had been busy quietly, patiently weaving together something none of us saw coming. The first clip spilled onto the screen, a shaky downward angle that spoke of secrecy, hidden in a backpack perhaps, but the sound was mercilessly clear. Elaine's voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. "She's clever, I'll give her that. But Nathan could have done so much better. What kind of example is that for a child raised by the state?" A slow, suffocating breath lodged itself in my throat, refusing to budge. Around the table there was a collective stillness, brittle and brittle-edged. Then came another clip, a different setting, her sunroom drenched in golden afternoon light. I remembered the day. I had stepped out to take a client call, foolishly assuming respect in my absence. It's no one's fault she comes from filth, but that doesn't mean we have to pretend she belongs. Elaine's words, smooth and venom-laced, slithered out into the open, stripping away every pretense of civility. And then the final blow. Nathan's voice, familiar, warm once, now foreign and sharp. "She gets too sensitive sometimes. I can't keep defending her. It just makes everything harder. You know how she is. That one didn't wound. It detonated. Somewhere deep inside, something unraveled, a thread pulled free from a tapestry so carefully, so desperately woven. Heat surged through me, furious and scalding, only to be chased by a shocking cold, as though someone had poured molten anger into my veins and then frozen it solid. My hands clenched at my sides, nails carving crescents into my skin, grounding me in the moment I so desperately wanted to escape. Nathan lurched to his feet, his words tumbling over themselves, frantic and tripping. "Jack, buddy, how did you even—" But his stammering found no purchase. Jack remained rooted, a small sentinel standing his ground. Calm, steady. He looked first at Elaine, then at Nathan, and finally softly up at me. "I don't want to eat with people who talk like that about my mom." The silence that followed was not the same suffocating hush from earlier. This was different. Electric. As though the very air had been recast, molecules reshaped into something sharper, something dangerous. Elaine's mouth opened once, twice, but no words emerged. For all her polished barbs and society smiles, she had nothing now. Nathan stepped forward, his hand reaching futile for the tablet. "Okay, that's enough," he said, voice low, words taut with the strain of control fraying at its edges. But it wasn't enough. The wildfire had already broken free. I looked at Jack, my sweet, quiet boy, standing not with anger, but with clarity. In that moment, I realized he wasn't merely defending me. He was holding up a mirror to the room, to them, to me. For years I had contorted myself, bending inward, smoothing edges, softening my voice to become palatable to a family that never intended to digest me. I had mistaken endurance for acceptance. But Jack didn't care for their delicate wine glasses or their cold, brittle smiles. He saw through them, and now he was making them see it too. With deliberate grace, I reached down and took the tablet from his hands, feeling the residual warmth of his small fingers. I pressed pause. The screen froze, Elaine's face mid-sneer, forever captured in a moment of her own making. I set the tablet gently on the gleaming mahogany table. Then, with fingers that no longer trembled, I untied the apron. Slowly, deliberately. Each motion felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The knots came undone with ease this time. Elaine found her voice brittle and cracking. That was taken out of context. I met her gaze unwavering. No, I said, my voice steady, it wasn't. I turned to Nathan next. His face, once so composed, was unraveling before my eyes, guilt clashing violently with panic, a man caught between the weight of complicity and the cost of indifference. I'm not angry you didn't defend me. I told him, each word carving itself into the space between us. I'm angry you thought I wouldn't notice, that I'd just keep swallowing it, that our son would. His mouth opened, lips shaping into an apology, but I was done waiting for words that never came. I reached down, took Jack's hand in mine, and said simply, "Let's go." No grand exits, no slammed doors, just the quiet, echoing taps of Jack's dress shoes on the marble tile, and the measured cadence of my own heartbeat growing louder, steadier, freer with every step. We didn't speak until we reached the car. Jack climbed into the back seat, his tablet resting silently in his lap, buckling himself in with quiet precision. The streetlights cast long, honeyed shadows across his face, and as I looked at him through the rearview mirror, I saw something new. Not fear, not confusion, but strength. A quiet, settled kind of strength, as if he had simply done what needed doing. My fingers curled around the steering wheel knuckles, white chest, still heaving with the aftermath. Beneath the pounding of my pulse, something else stirred. Clarity. For the first time in years, I could see the situation not as I had wanted it to be, not as I had labored to mold it, but exactly as it was. Jack's voice broke the stillness, soft but sure. "Are we in trouble?" I turned, eyes stinging, though a smile softened my lips. "No, baby. We're not in trouble. You were brave. You told the truth. That's never wrong." He nodded, shifting his gaze to the window, watching the world drift by. "Grandma was mean to you. All the time. I heard her. I didn't like it." My throat constricted. I reached back, brushing his knee with my fingertips. I didn't like it either. We drove home, cocooned in silence, not the heavy kind that suffocates, but the kind that soothes. The gentle hum of tires on asphalt, the soft exhale of the heater, the city breathing quietly around us. When we reached our apartment, I tucked Jack into bed. He wrapped his arms around me tighter than usual, his small body pressing against mine. "I love you, Mom," he mumbled, voice muffled against my shoulder. "I love you more," I whispered, kissing his forehead as he drifted off to sleep. Later, as I sat on the couch, hands folded in my lap, staring at the darkened TV screen, I caught my reflection, tired, yes, but not broken. Not anymore. Then the phone buzzed. Nathan again. Missed calls, voicemails, a flood of texts. "Lena, please, let's talk." I didn't know he recorded that. She didn't mean it like that. "I'm sorry, I'll fix it." Fix it. As if the fractures of years could be spackled over with apologies now. How do you mend the slow erosion of trust? The quiet complicity? How do you undo the moment you laughed at someone else's pain? I didn't respond. The phone rang again. I let it. Because somewhere between the silence and the static, something fundamental had shifted, not just in them, but in me. For years, I thought walking away would be failure. Proof that I hadn't tried hard enough to build this family to belong. But as I sat there in the soft hum of my own quiet space, I realized walking out wasn't defeat. It was freedom. Choosing myself, choosing my son. The morning after felt oddly weightless, as though some invisible yoke had finally slipped from my shoulders. Yet as I brewed coffee in the quiet hush of my apartment, the familiar chime of my inbox broke the fragile peace. Elaine Carter, ever incapable of relinquishing control, had sent me an email. One line, nothing more. "You've made your point. I hope you're happy." No apology, no admission of wrong. Just more of the same, the sharp edge dulled by passive aggression, a feigned graciousness that reeked of resentment. I stared at it for a heartbeat, then another before deleting it without so much as a blink. For once there was no internal debate, no clenching in my chest, just the soft, satisfying finality of erasure. By the week's end, I was scrolling through listings of modest apartments. Smaller, simpler, spaces meant for Jack and me, nothing grand. Just enough room for peace to stretch out, for love to breathe without contortion, and for the kind of quiet where we could both stand tall, side by side as equals. Nathan kept reaching out, persistent but measured. And if I'm being honest, I didn't slam the door in his face, not yet. Love isn't a light switch no matter how much it aches. But I was different now. This time I made it clear words would no longer suffice. If he wanted to be part of our lives, it would require more than apologies crafted in moments of panic. He'd have to show up, speak up, every time. Not just when it was easy, but especially when it wasn't. Still, whether he rose to that challenge or not, I had made my decision. I wasn't waiting anymore. Jack had already shown me what I needed to see. That night at Elaine's table, my son hadn't simply defended me. He had handed me a reflection, one I'd avoided for too long. In his small act of defiance, he reminded me of a truth I had buried beneath years of careful shrinking. I was already enough. People often describe life-changing moments as thunderous events. Doors, slamming voices raise the cinematic crescendo of everything shifting at once. But for me, change was quieter. It was the sensation of something unclenching inside my chest, a slow loosening after years of relentless pressure. It was subtle, yet absolute. It didn't transform my world overnight. I didn't wake up the next morning in a new life, radiant with fresh beginnings. But I did wake up certain that the old life, the one where I folded myself small to fit into Nathan's world, was no longer welcome. In the days that followed, I began unpacking pieces of myself I hadn't touched in years. Not just the tired survivor who had juggled 2 jobs while cramming for exams, but the woman from before. The version of me who had known what she wanted, who had carved out space for herself, who hadn't yet been worn down by the sharp edges of other people's expectations. I filled notebooks with lists, ideas, fragments of forgotten dreams. I reached out to friends I had let drift away, people who had seen me not as Nathan's wife, not as Elaine's constant disappointment, but simply as Lena. Smart, creative, whole. Jack and I found a rhythm, a life that felt real. He stopped asking about Grandma. The video, too, became a closed chapter in his mind. He had seen something wrong and tried to make it right. Simple. Pure. I prayed the world would never strip that from him. Nathan visited a few times. Always carefully timed after school, before bedtime, never unannounced. His apologies were softer now, less defensive, more sincere. He spoke of therapy, of finally unpacking the baggage he had pretended not to carry. I listened. I didn't offer promises. Love lingers even when trust falters, but rebuilding trust is not a declaration, it is a daily, deliberate act. I told him plainly if he wanted a future with us, he would have to earn it. No more mistaking silence for peace. Elaine, for her part, remained silent. Predictably so. People like her rarely confront their reflection unless forced, and even then they will insist the mirror is warped. But that was no longer my concern. Her approval had become irrelevant, her absence a quiet blessing. Once I believed being part of a family meant being liked, approved of, chosen. I twisted myself into shapes I thought would fit. Now I understood family differently. Family is not defined by whose door you enter. It's defined by who stands beside you when you're hurting, who amplifies your voice, not speaks over it, who makes space for you, not conditions. That lesson came from Jack, delivered without fanfare. A 7-year-old with more clarity than the roomful of adults we had left behind. The memory of that dinner, the apron, the smirk, the quiet humiliation used to sit heavy in my chest, a scar that whispered of failure, but not anymore. Now it marked the moment of pivot, the instant I stopped contorting myself for people blind to my worth. When I looked in the mirror now, I saw her again. The girl from Newark who had never been given much, but who knew how to build from scraps, how to rise from concrete cracks. I saw a mother raising a son who spoke truth without fear. A woman who had learned finally to stop apologizing for her own existence. And so if there is someone out there reading this, someone who has ever felt small in someone else's world, someone who has dulled their light to keep the peace, I need you to hear me. You don't need their approval. You don't need to fold yourself into palatable shapes just to belong. You are already enough. If the people around you cannot see your worth, perhaps it's time to build a life where you are seen, heard, cherished. Because the moment you choose yourself, your peace, your dignity, your voice, that is the moment your real life begins. That is when you finally come home to yourself. If my story resonated with you, if even a fragment of it felt familiar, I'd love to hear yours. Leave a comment, share a thought, or simply say hello. No one should feel alone in this. And if this story offered you strength even for a moment, I invite you to share, and help spread that light to someone else who might be standing where I once stood. It matters more than you know. For more stories like this, stories about real people, real moments, and the quiet revolutions that change everything, hit subscribe, tap the bell, stay connected.